Dnalysis. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you very much for coming to our launch of the DNA Fit and DNA Fit Cycle genetic tests. These tests are the combination of close to 18 months, 2 years of research and development, and we're extremely excited to be able to finally introduce these tests and bring them to the South African market. We believe that the DNA Fit and the DNA Cycle genetic test will add a much needed dimension to the scientific aspect of sporting performance, assisting athletes in customizing their training programs to not only achieve faster and better results, but to sustain them as well. Since inception, the primary goal of Dnalysis has been to bring scientific advances in human genomics research to the health and wellness consumer. And the genetic tests of DNA Fit and DNA Fit Cycle perfectly complement our existing product range. The current test, the DNA Diet, which tests 8 genes involved in weight management and fat metabolism, and DNA Health, which looks at genes involved in predisposition for chronic disease, all fit perfectly in this market of preventive medicine, of health and wellness, and of personalization of health, diet, nutrition, and exercise advice. So 2012 has been a big year for us. Not only are we here launching the first exercise-based genetic tests in South Africa, we also earlier this year introduced the country's first estrogen metabolism genetic test. This is being used by medical practitioners in the country to make clinical decisions to ultimately lower breast cancer risk for women. As the Human Genome Project continues to evolve and more research becomes available and more research into the field of genetics is concluded, Dnalysis Biotechnology will continue to bring these state-of-the-art molecular advances to the health and wellness sectors. Now, traditionally there's been something of a so what factor around genetic tests of this nature. If there's nothing that comes out of the test, if there's nothing that can be done, if there's no actionable advice that comes out of the genetic test, then really there's no point to that genetic test. As with our DNA Diet and our DNA Health products, a key priority in the development of the DNA Fit product was that the genetic information that we obtain can be translated into practical advice from which everyone from the weekend warrior to the elite athlete can benefit. To this end, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the co-developer of the DNA Fit test, Ian Craig. As a nutritional therapist, exercise physiologist, personal trainer, and apparently not too shabby middle distance runner, Ian proved to have the ideal skill set required to translate the genetic information into tangible, practical training recommendations. So I'll now hand you over to Ian, who will take you to the test in a little more detail.
So this morning we woke up, probably brushed our teeth, we had something to eat, which may or may not have been healthy. We might have done some exercise, or we might wait till later on to do some exercise. We may have layered ourselves with toiletries. And all of these interactions that we've actually done so far today, and the commute and traffic to get here, all of these things interact with our genes. Genes have previously been thought as very hardwired structures that are there, and you're either lucky as an individual or you're unlucky. We actually have a huge interaction with our environment, and part of what we want to understand is what is our environment around us, and we've been doing that. We've been looking at our diet, we've been looking at our health, we've been looking at our exercise, we've been looking at our lifestyle. But the other big chunk, and the experts seem to consider it as plus or minus 50% of our what's called phenotype. Phenotype is how we express as an individual. Look around the room, we're all entirely different, we all have a different phenotype. So plus or minus 50% of our genetics set up who we are as a person. The rest is our upbringing, our environment, our exercise history, our nutrition, our lifestyle, our psychology. It's a huge interaction. So what we want to actually know is what's our underlying genetics, and how can we actually use that information in order to make the best out of us? You know, we're all interested in becoming healthier, becoming fitter. I'm quite a new person to Johannesburg, but I just go around and I sense a big need to be healthy, a big need to be fit. I go into a gym and I see very crazed exercisers doing quite hectic regimes. So people want that. People are actually opening up to health information. So I think with regards to genetics, we're in a nice time with regards to people wanting the information, people wanting to be healthy. I'm going to give you 3 examples of athletes who are examples of genetically endowed people to do certain things. Okay, we've just had the Olympics there. I was lucky enough to be there. It was an incredible experience. I'll mention 2 athletes that were there. Michael Phelps, you know, incredible swimmer, probably the best swimmer we've ever seen. Genetically, he's got something. He also trains his ass off. He also has huge belief in his own abilities. He also eats a huge amount, so that maybe helps him as well. All of these things help him to be the athlete he is, but he has the underlying genes. Usain Bolt, there's the other one. If he's in the right headspace, he's totally unbeatable. There's discussion about whether he's on drugs or not, but yeah, I think regardless of that, they're all pretty much in a level playing field nowadays. The guy's got a genetic ability beyond anything we've ever seen. Sprinters aren't tall, sprinters aren't big, sprinters aren't slow out of the blocks. But he's all of those things, but yet he can out-sprint anyone and has a massive world record in 2 races. Okay, genetic abnormalities, genetic outliers, it's quite interesting to know about. The 3rd example I want to give you is Dave the Fireman. Dave the Fireman's an old friend of mine, and I used to be a middle distance runner, that was my event, and in my prime I was personal training part-time in order to satisfy my training needs and my racing. And I was personal training in the gym, and I set up a little running club, and it was mostly fairly recreational runners that I would take out once a week. This guy Dave pitches up one day, and he was running along with me at the front, quite effortless, and yeah, I could tell he was quite good. So I said, after a few runs, why don't you come to my athletic club with me and you know, have a go, because I think you're quite talented. The first race he did after about a few weeks of training, it was an 800 meter race. He sat on my tail all the way around until 700 meters, off the final bend. And I was flat out, I was gone, I was in 3rd or 4th place, I didn't have the change of gear. He suddenly realized, oh hey, I'm still fresh. He can back past me like a bat out of hell, and he narrowly missed winning the race by about this. So if he hadn't been watching me and been watching the leader instead, he'd have won the race. There's genetics for you. That was the point that I realized, hey, I'm not going to the Olympics. This guy could do it, but he was the kind of guy that didn't have it in the head. You know, he would run the London Marathon, you know, a few days before an important race, and just pitch up and do well anyway. So it's a contribution of genetics and good lifestyle, training, dietary patterns, and belief, huge belief that makes the best athletes. Okay, I just want to give you a few research references. You all have a pack in your bags. Please don't sort of flick through them just now, or I'll lose you in the middle of it. But there's a fact sheet, and it gives a few examples of research studies, and also all the genes. So, you know, that's the detailed information. If you want more detailed information than that, we have it. We have a research white paper that we've put together as well. So, I'm going to give you a few examples from that. There's a well-known study that looked at several thousand Russian athletes versus several thousand controls. Sorry, several hundred, it was 1,000 and something athletes versus controls. What they found was 66% of elite athletes had 8 or more gene types. When I say gene types, we all have all of these genes, but they're expressed differently in different individuals. Okay, so I'll just say gene type so you know what I'm meaning. So that was a very strong correlation of this grouping of genes that was associated with athletic performance. So that's kind of what we've done as a test. We've actually got 13 genes associated with power and endurance to give you an overall feel. The second one I want to give you is a specific gene. Most of the research is looking at the specific genes that we've included in the test. So there's one called NERV2, and on their own, they don't really mean much to you. The first time I looked at these genes, I was like, okay, what is this? It's a bunch of letters. But if you actually translate it out to the whole name, it maybe means something a bit more. This is called nuclear receptor factor 2. And what this is a genetic marker that actually supports the mitochondrial function. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. If you don't have good mitochondrial function, you won't be able to do good endurance training and performance. So there is actually 3 genes in our panel that look at mitochondrial function. This particular genotype is very rare, and only 2% of the general population have this configuration. But 12% of successful endurance athletes have it, so a very clear difference there. And if you have it, it's been shown that you can potentially have a 50% greater trainability of your VO2 max, your maximum oxygen uptake, and also your running economy. And these are huge differences between, Jim and Billy. Billy doesn't have this gene, Jim does. Is that the name I use? Can't remember. The same amount of training with Jim will get much bigger endurance returns. Unfortunately, I don't have that gene, so I blame my insufficiency to beat Dave the fireman on my genes. The second gene I want to bring out, VEGF. Again, on its own it doesn't mean much, but growth factor. So basically, it grows new blood vessels. It codes for the information to grow new blood vessels. So it's vascular control, and as you might expect, it codes for endurance function. And this particular genotype has been found to be significantly higher in endurance athletes than control subjects, and the relationship is more pronounced as the athletes studied get better, have a higher performance. And the last one I want to say is ACE. ACE means angiotensin converting enzyme. It's a blood pressure monitoring kind of hormone in our body that's coded by the gene ACE. And it's been the most studied of all the genes in our tests. And if you have a particular configuration, it's actually very highly correlated with endurance. If you have another configuration, it's highly correlated with power. So most of our genes either are endurance genes or they're power genes, but they're not both. This one's both. And the example here, research example, 55 male Polish rowers of a world standard that had the certain gene configuration, the endurance type, had a significantly higher frequency compared to controls. And you can take that information across to power as well. Okay? So just a few examples for you to let you realize that there's quite a lot of research behind this. These are just a few. There's a lot that we can pull out. And that brings me nicely on to how the test was developed. We have a lady called Yael who's part of Dnalysis company, and she's a top geneticist in her understanding of genes and their interaction in the body. She and an international expert put together DNA Fit, selected the genes based on the research that's available. And there's a certain threshold of research that is required before a certain gene is included. So you might find certain ones in our test, and You may find another genetic test elsewhere with other genes or additional genes maybe, but they haven't met our threshold of scientific rigor. Okay, so our international expert tells us, okay, there's enough data now on this gene in order to include it in your panel and do it commercially. Okay. How I've been involved with Dnalysis for the last year, and been very much taking my base knowledge of exercise and nutrition, lifestyle, and putting it into this test to get it at a level where consumers can actually understand how the genes are important to them. Okay, bringing it down to the ground level. Okay, so what does this mean for your training? Should I be running? Should I be rowing? Should I be doing triathlons? Or actually should I be lifting big heavy weights? That sort of information is very, very important, or else the genetic information is a waste of time. So we pride ourselves in actually providing genes that have a correlation to real life. Okay. The test is a very simple one to do. It's a cheek swab. Looks like an oversized cotton bud. You just rub it inside your cheek and put it in a little sheath, and it goes in the mail. You can courier or mail it through regular mail. It comes to the laboratory here in Johannesburg, and so everything is done in-house. It's not sent overseas as many companies do, and it's very much a home test. So somebody can just take the kits, they can order it off the website, it comes to their house, do the swab, send it in the post, get the results a couple of weeks later. The other option, which we're very proud of, is our practitioner network, and people can go to a practitioner, they'll do the swab right there and then, the practitioner will send it off, and the practitioner then gets the results that will work with the people. And I'll say a little bit more about the practitioners in a moment. Okay, so categories of the test. We have two main categories. One is power and endurance. So as I said before, we've got 13 genes that code for either one or t'other or both. And we build up a bit of a scoring system around the genes in order to say, okay, how weighted are you towards endurance and how weighted are you towards power? So we create a graph. And we've got a sample report on our website now, which you can have a look at if you want. And it's a pie chart that will tell you, okay, you're 50% endurance, 50% power. Or you're 60 endurance, 40 power. Or actually you're an Olympic weightlifter in the weighting, and you're 80% power, 20% endurance. So that's the first part. The second part is a couple of graphs that tell you, okay, this is your endurance weighting and this is your power weighting. Because you could say, right, well, hey, I'm 80% power here, so that means, oh, I'm going to be an Olympic weightlifter. But actually, the amount of genes that are saying you're a good power athlete is actually quite low. But the amount of genes saying you're a good endurance athlete is even lower. So the pattern looks like you're going to be very power oriented, but your actually individual scoring is not so great. And we have these graphs with an average indicated, so you know if you're kind of, okay, you've got very good attributes or average attributes or slightly below average. Okay. The second part, injury and recovery. So we have genes that code for basically soft tissue injuries. There's been a lot of research done around collagen and the potential injury to collagen. And some people are just unlucky, and again I'll blame my genes for my athletic inability. I was constantly injured as an athlete, mostly Achilles tendons. And most of the research so far has been done around tendinitis, a little bit around ligament strains, and sure enough I had top score for injury. And then the other one is recovery. And recovery has been linked into a couple of different physiological variables. One is inflammation and one is oxidative stress. And most people now kind of understand what that is. We all have a certain degree of inflammation in our body, if we go and do a heavy training session one day and get a muscle soreness the next day or 2-3 days after, there's a big inflammation reaction. But some people get it worse than others. I did my first kettlebell session on Monday, so today I'm finding it hard to move. So my recovery is not so great, but that's not, it's a part of my genes, but also part, you know, what's going on in my life just now, how I'm eating, stress levels, how much I'm sleeping. These all contribute to recovery as well. So we're realistic about that. We want to find out the genetic information. If they score quite highly in inflammation and oxidative stress, then we'll say, okay, you're likely to have a slower than normal recovery, slower than average recovery. So you should actually do more to help facilitate the recovery process. The old-fashioned coaching methods were just go home and rest. But actually, we know a lot more than that now. This is probably the strongest part of the test that you can do nutritional strategies with. Nutritionally, we understand how to decrease oxidative stress, and we understand how to decrease oxidative stress. And really support these systems, and then enhance recovery pace. But sleep is a hugely important thing in stress levels and you know, various other factors in your life. So also being realistic, how much are you doing in your life? And maybe it's not the time to take on the comrades just yet. Okay, significance of the test. So some people say, well, surely this is just for elite athletes. Elite athletes can gain from it, but also I actually see more potential in the recreational athletes. Elite athletes are already differentiated in their sport. They've already sussed out what they're good at. If they weren't, they wouldn't be at this elite level. What you can do is help to refine them. So you're able to say, okay, well, maybe you should get a little bit more power training in your program, a little bit more sprint training, a little bit more resistance work. Oh, hey, your recovery is not so good, so maybe not train every day. Have a Friday off. Try and get a little bit more sleep. So it's guidance like that. It's refinement. For recreational athletes, most are not refined. Differentiated. I go into Virgin Active and walk into the cardio theatre, full of chicks. Walk into the weights room, full of blokes that are trying to look like the cover of Men's Fitness. Unsuccessfully, they tend to, you know, have a big pecs and biceps and skinny back and legs. So we can actually genetically test these people and say to the girls, okay, hey, you've got some power in here, come and use it. You'll get better training returns for the effort that you put in rather than spending hours doing cardio. And conversely, blokes in the weights room, dude, you're never going to be Arnie, just be realistic about that. You've got some good endurance genes, let's come and do some fun running. Go and do a 5k or 10k, maybe enter a half marathon. Maybe consider the 94.7, you know, use the genes that you've got. So getting the better bang for your buck. And one of our associated tests is DNA diet for weight management. Within understanding your exercise regime, you can actually help reduce your body weight by training appropriately. I've met people who have used genetic information. They've been doing too much cardio before, and then they actually reduce some of that and put some weight training in the program and actually start losing weight. And that's what I used to do as a personal trainer as well. I would tend to focus more on the resistance work, get the foundations right, and then the cardio comes on top. But now, if I was to go back in the gym again, I could refine it hugely more. So there's a great potential for personal training.